put her last single night up for auction as a bachelorette stunt, except the vampire king outbid her fiancé by $2 million in front of 300 witnesses. The ballroom froze. What no one knew, the vampire king recognized the bracelet on her wrist as stolen property from his murdered sister, and the man she's marrying tomorrow is next on his list. Mara Chen stood center stage in the Grand Belmont Ballroom, her silver gown catching the light from a dozen crystal chandeliers overhead, sending fractured starlight dancing across 300 upturned faces. The sapphire bracelet on her wrist felt heavier than it had any right to, cooler against her skin than the stage lights blazing down on her, and she fought the urge to twist it nervously as the auctioneer's jovial voice boomed through the space. This had seemed like such a good idea when Jenna suggested it 2 weeks ago. A romantic gesture to cap off her last night as a single woman, all the proceeds going to the Children's Art Foundation, where Mara volunteered every Saturday, teaching underprivileged kids about color theory and brush techniques. Tomorrow at dawn, she would marry Marcus Hale in the Cathedral of Glass, exchange vows with the corporate lawyer who had courted her with quiet persistence for 2 years, and this auction was supposed to be the charming story they told at dinner parties for decades to come. And now's the time to stop and subscribe to our channel. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these tales travel across the world. Now let's continue. The crowd smelled of champagne and expensive perfume, their laughter rippling through the ballroom like water over stones, and Mara tried to smile as the bidding began at $20,000. Marcus stood near the front, looking handsome in his tailored tuxedo, raising his paddle with theatrical flair as he bid $50,000 and the room erupted in applause. A few friends made playful counterbids, driving the price up in increments that made Mara's heart race with gratitude for the foundation's bank account. And then a voice cut through the merriment like ice through silk. $2 million. The words hung in the air, impossible and sharp, and the ballroom froze mid-breath as conversations died and champagne glasses stopped halfway to painted lips. Even the auctioneer stammered, his practiced patter deserting him as every head turned toward the back of the room where a man stepped into the light, with the fluid grace of a predator who had never known fear. Dominic Ashford moved through the parting crowd like darkness given form, tall and lean, in a black suit that probably cost more than Mara's car. His dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, and his eyes the color of winter storms. The whispers started immediately, a susurrus of recognition and unease that told Mara this was someone important, someone dangerous, and she felt confusion bloom into embarrassment as she realized her cute romantic gesture had just been hijacked by a vampire king. She looked for Marcus, saw his face drain of color like someone had opened a valve and let all the blood run out, watched his hand shake as it reached for his phone, and a terrible cold certainty began to settle in her stomach. Dominic walked to the stage with absolute authority, each step measured and deliberate, and addressed the auctioneer with a voice that carried effortlessly through the silent ballroom. "I believe that concludes the bidding." The auctioneer, clearly flustered and possibly terrified, nodded so hard his jowls shook and brought the gavel down with a crack like a gunshot. "Sold to Mr. Ashford for $2 million. Mara tried to laugh it off, turning toward Marcus with a "what is happening" expression. But Marcus was already backing toward the exit, his face a mask of pure terror that made no sense unless something was very, very wrong. She opened her mouth to call after him, but Dominic was suddenly there, his presence filling her awareness, those winter storm eyes locked not on her face, but on the bracelet circling her wrist. She watched his expression shift from cold neutrality to recognition to a rage so tightly controlled it made the air around him seem to vibrate, and when he extended his hand toward her, she saw his fingers were steady, even as fury blazed in his eyes. "The contract is binding, Miss Chen. I have purchased your time from sunset tonight until sunrise tomorrow." His voice dropped lower, meant only for her ears, as he leaned close enough that she could feel the unnatural chill radiating from his skin. That bracelet belonged to my sister. She was wearing it the night she was murdered. And the man you are marrying killed her. The world tilted sideways and Mara's vision narrowed to a tunnel, her heartbeat suddenly loud in her ears as she looked frantically for Marcus and found only empty space where her fiancé had been standing. Mara tried to pull her hand away from Dominic, but his grip was firm without being painful, unmistakable strength wrapped in careful control, and she was peripherally aware of Jenna shoving through the crowd with murder in her eyes. "Mara, you do not have to go with him." Jenna's voice was fierce with protective fury, but Dominic was already producing a document from inside his jacket, unfolding it with one hand while keeping Mara anchored with the other. He read aloud in that carrying voice, every word clear and legally binding. The winning bidder purchases exclusive companionship for the designated time period, binding under human and immortal commerce law. Mara felt heat flood her cheeks as she realized what she had signed in her naive enthusiasm. How Jenna's romantic gesture had trapped her in a contract she had not bothered to read carefully. "That is insane. I am not property." Her voice came out stronger then. She felt anger beginning to burn through the shock. Dominic's expression did not change. "No, but your word is binding. You signed a contract. Will you honor it, or are you a liar as well as a thief?" The accusation stung, and Mara jerked back as far as his grip allowed. "I am not a thief. Marcus gave me this bracelet." Dominic's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the pale skin, and he held out his phone with his free hand to show her a photograph. The young woman in the image was dark-haired and laughing, her whole face alight with joy, and on her wrist was the exact bracelet Mara wore, same phoenix clasp with wings spread in flight, same arrangement of sapphires that caught the light like captured sky. That bracelet was custom-made for Elena Ashford, my sister. She never took it off. It disappeared the night she died. An older woman in the crowd spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "Dominic Ashford does not lie. If he says it belonged to his sister, it did." Someone else added, "Elena Ashford was murdered 3 years ago. Case went cold." Jenna grabbed Mara's other arm, her grip desperate. "You do not have to do this. We will call the police." Dominic's laugh was bitter and brief. "The police already failed. This is a matter of immortal law now." Mara searched the crowd again for Marcus, for some explanation that would make sense of his terror and his flight. But he was gone, and that absence told her more than his presence ever had. She could refuse, could cause a scene, could demand security escort this vampire king from the premises. But something in Dominic's eyes stopped her. The raw grief beneath the rage speaking to a pain she understood too well. And that terrible doubt was blooming in her chest, roots spreading through her certainty like cracks through ice. Why did Marcus run? "If I go with you, you have to explain everything. No secrets, no games." Her voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. Dominic nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Agreed. But we leave now." Mara turned to Jenna, saw fear and fury warring in her best friend's face. "Call me in 2 hours. If I do not answer." She let the threat hang unfinished, and Jenna nodded, pulling out her phone with shaking fingers. "I will call everyone." Dominic offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy that seemed absurd given the circumstances, and Mara took it because she had signed a contract and because she needed answers more than she needed safety. They walked through the silent ballroom, and Mara felt every eye on her, the weight of 300 people's judgment and curiosity pressing against her skin like physical force. Dominic's hand at the small of her back was oddly steadying, his presence a strange anchor in a world that had just revealed itself to be something other than what she thought. And when the doors closed behind them, it sounded like fate sealing her into a story she had not chosen to enter. Outside, a black car waited at the curb, sleek and expensive, and somehow predatory in the way it crouched against the pavement. Dominic opened the door for her, and Mara hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming that getting into this car would change everything. that there would be no going back to flower arrangements and wedding cake tastings, and the safe, boring life she had built for herself. You can still walk away. Dominic's voice was quiet, giving her the choice even as his eyes promised consequences. But if you do, Marcus will marry you tomorrow, and within a year, you will be another name on my list of unsolved murders. Mara got in the car and the door closed with a sound like a cell locking. Inside the car, the world became leather seats and tinted windows that turned the city into abstract lights, the partition between them and the driver raised for privacy that felt more like isolation. Mara's anger was overcoming her fear, burning hot and bright in her chest as she turned to face the vampire king who had just upended her entire life. Start talking. Who was your sister? How did she die? And why do you think Marcus killed her? Dominic settled back against the seat, his face unreadable in the passing streetlights, measuring his words with the care of someone who had learned that truth was a weapon that could cut both ways. Elena was 23, an artist, idealistic. She believed vampires and humans could coexist peacefully. She ran a foundation that taught art to underprivileged children. Mara's stomach dropped, a sickening lurch that made bile rise in her throat. That is the foundation I volunteer with. Dominic nodded, his expression grim. Elena started it. After her death, it was kept running by donations. Your donations, in fact. The coincidence felt too large to be accidental, threads of connection weaving through her life in patterns she had not seen, and Mara wrapped her arms around herself against a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. 3 years ago, Elena was found in an alley behind the Meridian Gallery. Dominic's voice was carefully neutral, but Mara heard the pain beneath it, sharp as broken glass. She had been drained of blood, jewelry stripped, left like garbage. Police ruled it a feral vampire attack, a rogue vampire who lost control. Case closed within 48 hours. But Elena was too careful, too strong to be taken by a feral. Dominic pulled out a tablet, began swiping through images with practiced efficiency. I spent 3 years tracking her belongings through black markets. The bracelet surfaced 6 months ago at an underground auction. Buyer, Marcus Hale, listed as private collector. I have been watching Marcus ever since, building a case. He showed her photographs of Marcus at various locations, underground venues that looked exactly like what they were, places where illegal things changed hands for illegal money. Items were marked in red on the screen, vampire relics and blood diamonds and artifacts from suspicious deaths, and beneath each one were financial records showing Marcus's wealth increasing dramatically over the past 4 years. Encrypted messages scrolled past, coded language that even Mara could tell meant something sinister. Marcus is boring. The words came out defensive, desperate. He works 80-hour weeks, complains about traffic, falls asleep watching documentaries. He is not a murderer. But even as she said it, the inconsistencies were surfacing in her mind like bodies rising from deep water. The locked office in his apartment she had never been allowed to enter, the business trips he never talked about, the way he deflected when she asked about the bracelet's history with a smile that did not reach his eyes. How he had insisted on the Cathedral of Glass for the wedding, would not even consider other venues no matter how beautiful or convenient. Do you know why he chose that venue? Dominic's voice was soft, almost gentle, as if he knew he was dismantling her world brick by brick. Mara shook her head, not trusting her voice. He said it was romantic, historic. It is protected by sanctuary law. Once he speaks his vows there, he is untouchable by vampire justice. Ancient treaty. If I want to prosecute him, I have to do it before dawn. The ticking clock settled over Mara like a weight, approximately 8 hours between this moment and sunrise, 8 hours to prove the man she had planned to spend her life with was a monster. If you have all this evidence, why have you not gone to the police? Her voice was small, already knowing the answer, because half the force is on his payroll. Dominic's bitterness was palpable. I tried. My evidence was circumstantial. Witnesses recanted. Files disappeared. Marcus has spent years building protection. Then what do you need me for? Access. You are his fiancé. You can get into places I cannot. And I need a confession. Dominic leaned forward, his intensity focused on her like a spotlight. Help me get proof Marcus killed Elena. In exchange, I will make sure you are safe from whatever else he is involved in. And if I refuse, then you marry a murderer tomorrow, and I spend the next century watching him destroy more lives. But you will be free of me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with choice and consequence, and Mara looked at the bracelet on her wrist, at Elena's smiling face on the tablet, at the evidence of a life she had not known existed beneath the surface of her own. What do you need me to do? First, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Dominic's eyes searched hers, looking for something she was not sure she could give. I do not even know you. Then let me show you who I am, and who he is. The car pulled up to a sleek high-rise that screamed money and power, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky like an accusation. Where are we? My home. You will be safe here while we plan. Mara's heart was pounding as she followed him inside, through a lobby that smelled of expensive marble and into an elevator that rose so smoothly she barely felt the movement. The penthouse was exactly what she expected, and nothing like what she imagined. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city like a kingdom spread for viewing, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year, and walls lined with art that made her conservator instincts sit up and take notice. She stopped in front of a painting, her professional eye cataloging brushwork and color choices before her brain caught up with recognition. That is a real Monet. Her voice was awed despite everything. Elena's favorite. Dominic's voice cracked slightly, the first real emotion breaking through his control. She used to sit in front of it for hours. Mara turned to look at him and saw grief etched in every line of his face, raw and unhealed despite 3 years passing, and something in her softened despite her fear and confusion. A woman appeared from another room, 30-ish, with silver-streaked black hair and tactical clothing that suggested she was comfortable with violence. Dominic made introductions with careful formality. This is Yara. She is Dampier, half vampire and half human. She has been helping me investigate. Yara's assessment was blunt and immediate. You are either very brave or very stupid to get in a car with him. I am still deciding which. Mara surprised herself with the response, and Yara grinned, sharp and approving. I like her. They moved to an office that looked like something from a crime drama. Monitors and files and evidence boards covering every surface. Photographs of Marcus at various locations connected by red string to timelines and financial records. Mara saw the scope of the investigation and understood this was 3 years of obsessive work. Thousands of hours spent hunting a killer who wore the face of a boring corporate lawyer. We have identified at least 6 other murders tied to Marcus's operation. Yara's voice was clinical, detached. He is not working alone. Marcus keeps records, insurance against his partners betraying him. Dominic was all business now, explaining the plan with military precision. The records are in a safe in his apartment, hidden behind a false panel in his study. Mara had been to the apartment dozens of times, but never in the study, Marcus always keeping it locked with explanations about client confidentiality and legal ethics. You are going to go back to him. Tell him I interrogated you, that you convinced me the bracelet was purchased legally, that I have backed off. Mara stared at him incredulously. He will never believe I would come back. He will. Yara produced a tiny device disguised as an earring, something that looked innocent and deadly at the same time. Because you are going to tell him the wedding is off unless he can prove the bracelet is not stolen. Make him show you the receipt, the provenance. He will have to access the safe. This is a microtransmitter. We will hear everything, record everything. The moment he opens that safe and we see what is inside, we will have him. And if he realizes what I am doing? Mara's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Then I will be listening when you scream, and I will be there in 30 seconds. Dominic's honesty was not comforting, but it was real, and Mara found herself pacing the room as the weight of what they were asking settled over her shoulders. This morning, I was planning flower arrangements. Now I am being asked to spy on my fiancé for a vampire king. This is insane. Dominic approached slowly, giving her space to retreat if she wanted, and took her hands gently in his cold ones. I know, and I would not ask if there were any other way. But Elena was 23. She had her whole life ahead of her. Someone took that from her. If it was Marcus, do you not want to know? Mara thought of her own sister, Lily, killed 5 years ago in a hit and run. The driver never caught, and the questions never answered. And she knew exactly the agony of not knowing, the way it ate at you like acid through metal. Okay, I will do it. But not just for you, for all of them. She pointed to the board of victims, faces staring out from photographs, lives cut short by greed and violence. Dominic's thank you was quiet but heartfelt, and their eyes held for a long moment, something passing between them that Mara could not name but felt all the way to her bones. Yara cleared her throat, breaking the moment with practical necessity. We need to move. Marcus will be expecting you to come back eventually. The longer you wait, the more suspicious it looks. Yara fitted the earring with practiced efficiency, testing the connection while Dominic coached Mara on what to say and how to act, his voice low and intense. Be angry. Be hurt that I humiliated you. Demand reassurance. He will want to smooth things over before the wedding. What if he has already gone? What if he ran? He will not. Dominic's certainty was absolute. He has spent too much building this life. He will try to salvage it. At the elevator, Dominic stopped her with a hand on her arm, his touch gentle despite the strength she knew he possessed. If at any point you feel unsafe, say the word sunrise 3 times. We will extract you immediately. And let him get away. Your life is worth more than my revenge. The words landed heavily between them, a promise and a confession wrapped together, and Mara nodded because she did not trust her voice. I will see you on the other side. The elevator doors closed and Mara was alone with her reflection in the polished metal, the earring glinting at her lobe and the bracelet cold against her wrist, one a weapon and one a clue to a murder she was about to help solve. The elevator descended and her phone buzzed, Marcus's name lighting up the screen. She answered and kept her voice steady. We need to talk. His voice was strained, fear barely concealed beneath forced calm. Where are you? I have been looking everywhere. I am coming home. Do not go anywhere. She hung up. Before he could respond and stepped into the night air, the city spread around her like a maze with monsters hiding in every shadow, and walked toward the apartment where her fiancé was waiting to smooth over the evening's disruption with lies she would finally be able to see through. Mara stood outside Marcus's building, with her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, the city noise fading to white static as Dominic's voice crackled softly in her ear like a guardian angel she had never asked for. We are online. Remember, angry fiancé, not investigator. The words steadied her even as her hands shook, and she pushed through the glass doors into the lobby where the doorman nodded at her with sympathy that suggested he had heard about the auction disaster, probably from the building gossip network that functioned faster than any news service. Marcus opened the door before she could knock, and she realized he had been waiting, probably watching from the window. And he looked terrible with his tie loosened and hair disheveled and eyes red like he had been crying or drinking or both. Mara, thank God, I thought. He pulled her into a hug and she forced herself not to stiffen, made herself hug back even though every muscle in her body was screaming to run, and she catalogued sensory details the way her conservation training had taught her, his cologne that usually comforted her, now cloying and too strong, the tension in his shoulders like steel cables, the way his breathing was just slightly too fast. She pulled back and let anger flood her voice, not entirely an act because fury was bubbling under her fear like lava under stone. What the hell was that tonight? Who is Dominic Ashford? Marcus went defensive immediately, his face arranging itself into concerned boyfriend mode with practiced ease. A paranoid vampire with a vendetta. I am sorry you got dragged into it. The smoothness of the lie made her stomach turn, but she pushed forward, playing her part. He said this bracelet belonged to his sister, that she was murdered. She watched Marcus's face carefully and caught it, just for a fraction of a second. A flash of something cold and calculating before he smoothed it over with sympathetic confusion. He is delusional. His sister died 3 years ago in a vampire attack. He cannot accept it, so he blames random people. Am I random? You gave me this bracelet. Marcus led her to the couch with gentle hands, poured wine from the bottle they had opened last week to celebrate the final wedding plans, and she did not drink it even though he pushed the glass toward her with encouraging smiles. I bought that bracelet at an estate sale 6 months ago. It is beautiful. I thought you would love it. I had no idea it had some tragic history. Do you have a receipt? The pause was too long. Just a heartbeat, but enough that she knew Dominic was right, and Marcus's laugh was forced as he shook his head. I do not keep receipts for gifts, Mara. That is not romantic. Then how do I know Ashford is not right? How do I know this is not stolen? She kept her voice plaintive, hurt girlfriend instead of investigator, and Marcus stood abruptly to pace the living room with agitation that might have been genuine. You are really going to believe him over me, after 2 years together? She had practiced this part in the car, Dominic coaching her on tone and body language, and she made her voice small and wounded. I do not know what to believe. You disappeared tonight. You did not defend me, did not fight for me. You just ran. Marcus's face hardened, and she saw another micro-expression, frustration barely concealed, and his voice came out clipped. I was protecting you. Ashford is dangerous. Then prove the bracelet is yours to give. Show me something, anything, that proves you bought it legally. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him calculating, weighing options. And finally, he nodded with visible frustration. Fine. I will find the paperwork. It is in my files. He moved toward the study, and Mara's heart leaped because it was working. The plan was actually working. But then he stopped with his hand on the door handle. Actually, let us talk about the real issue. Are you having second thoughts about tomorrow? The trap question hung in the air, and Mara could hear Dominic's breathing in her ear, steady and calm, anchoring her as she approached Marcus with softened body language. No. I need to know I am not marrying someone who lies to me. Marcus studied her face like he was reading a book in a foreign language, searching for deception, and she held his gaze with every ounce of sincerity she could muster, until he finally nodded. Okay, give me a minute. He unlocked the study door, and Mara heard Dominic's voice, quiet and approving. Well done. When he opens the safe, try to get a visual. Marcus entered the study, but left the door ajar, probably unconsciously, and Mara hovered in the doorway trying to look casual, while her conservator's eye catalogued everything. The mahogany desk, the locked filing cabinets, Marcus at the bookshelf pressing something hidden. A panel swung open to reveal a digital safe, and Marcus entered a code, his fingers moving quickly, and Mara focused hard trying to memorize the pattern. 0719. The safe opened and she strained to see inside, caught glimpses of files and a laptop and something wrapped in dark cloth that looked ominous. But then Marcus's phone rang with a shrill tone that made them both jump. He cursed, checked the screen, and his whole body went rigid. I have to take this. Client emergency. He grabbed the phone and closed the safe and exited the study, locking the door behind him with decisive clicks, and moved to the balcony for privacy while Mara stood frozen in the living room with frustration churning in her gut. Dominic's voice came through the earring, warm with approval. You did great. Now we need to get you out of there. She turned, away from the balcony where Marcus was visible through the glass, pacing and gesturing, and whispered as quietly as she could. Not yet. I can get back in. It is too dangerous. The code is 0719. If I can get into that study. Yara's voice cut in, sharp with recognition. That is Elena's birthday. July 19th. The silence on the line was heavy with meaning, and then Dominic spoke, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Get out! Now! But before Mara could move, Marcus returned from the balcony, and his expression had changed completely. The concerned boyfriend mask stripped away to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. That was interesting. My contact says Dominic Ashford's people have been asking questions about me tonight. Very specific questions. Mara's blood turned to ice in her veins, and she tried to keep her face neutral but knew she was failing. Did you really think I would not figure it out? He reached for her arm and she jerked back instinctively. Too fast, and the earring caught on her collar and clattered to the hardwood floor with a sound like breaking glass. Marcus picked it up with almost casual interest, examined the tiny device, and smiled with genuine amusement. A wire. How very dramatic. Mara ran for the door, but the deadbolt was engaged and needed a key she did not have, and she spun to find Marcus following her with calm and terrifying deliberation. We are 17 floors up, Mara. There is nowhere to go. She backed toward the balcony because it was the only direction left, and Marcus followed, blocking her escape back inside, and she could hear Dominic's voice faintly from the dropped earring. Mara, listen to me carefully. We are coming. Hold on. Marcus was advancing, and the balcony railing pressed against her back, 3 feet of metal between her and 17 floors of empty air, and she looked desperately at the neighboring balconies, but they were too far to jump. You want to know about Elena? Marcus's voice was almost conversational, like they were discussing the weather. Fine. Yes, I killed her. She was a loose end. She saw me at an auction, recognized me from some charity gala. I could not risk her talking. You are insane. I am practical. I broker artifacts, vampire, witch, fae. Very lucrative. But it requires discretion. Elena was going to expose me. She was 23. She was in the way. Like you are in the way now. Mara tried to buy time, her mind racing through possibilities. If you kill me, Ashford will know it was you. Will he? Marcus tilted his head thoughtfully. You jumped from my balcony after a fight. Tragic suicide. The pressure of the wedding. The stress of Ashford's accusations. The wire. Will show you broke into my study, tried to steal from me. I confronted you. You panicked. Self-defense narrative. He had thought this through, and Mara's conservator mind catalogued escape routes, finding none. The balcony railing too low for safety, the next balcony 8 feet away, and impossible to reach. The fire escape 2 balconies down and might as well be on the moon. Marcus reached for her and she grabbed a potted plant, threw it with all her strength, but he deflected it easily, and then he caught her wrist with a grip that bruised immediately. Don't make this harder than it has to be. She struggled, but he was stronger than she expected, stronger than any human should be, and later she would learn he had been taking vampire blood for enhancement, but right now all she knew was that she could not break free. Mara remembered the abort code and screamed it. Sunrise, sunrise, sunrise. Marcus looked confused, his grip loosening slightly. What are you? The balcony door exploded inward in a shower of glass and twisted metal, and Dominic stood in the wreckage with his eyes blazing red like stars going supernova, moving faster than thought should allow. He crossed the balcony in a blur that Mara's eyes could not track, ripped Marcus away from her with casual violence, and slammed him against the wall so hard the plaster cracked. Marcus's feet dangled 6 inches off the ground, and Dominic's voice was ice and fury. You have 3 seconds to convince me not to drop you over this balcony. Mara was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, but she forced words out. Dominic, do not. Yara appeared behind Dominic with a gun drawn, silver bullets gleaming in the chamber. Police are 2 minutes out. We need him alive. Dominic did not move, just stared at Marcus with murder written in every line of his body, and Marcus choked out words. You cannot touch me, vampire laws, assault. You just confessed to murdering my sister. Every law just became irrelevant. Mara touched Dominic's arm, her hand small against his sleeve, and spoke the only words she thought might reach him. Elena would want justice, not revenge. The words cut through his rage like a knife through silk, and he dropped Marcus, who crumpled to the floor gasping, and Dominic's voice was deadly calm. Justice, then. But if the human courts fail, I am coming back. Yara was already zip-tying Marcus's wrists with practiced efficiency, and sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Police arrived, and Yara must have called them during the confrontation because they came through the shattered door with weapons drawn, and the recording from the wire was admissible, Marcus's confession clear as crystal on the audio file. Officers took Marcus into custody, while he screamed about police corruption and made threats and demanded his lawyer, but the evidence was damning. Files from the safe documenting 6 murders, including Elena's, artifacts with provenance that traced back to suspicious deaths, client lists that would keep investigators busy for years. Mara sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket someone had produced, giving her statement to a detective who seemed actually trustworthy, unlike the corrupt officers Marcus had bought, and she was shaking from adrenaline crash, her body finally catching up to the terror her mind had pushed through. Dominic hovered nearby and would not leave her side even when the detective suggested he wait in another room, and Yara was showing police the safe contents, her voice clinical as she explained the conspiracy that went deeper than one man. The detective, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, looked at Mara with genuine concern. Miss Chen, are you safe to go home tonight? Mara thought about her apartment, the place she had been planning to leave after the wedding when she moved in with Marcus, and realized she could not go back there, could not sleep in the bed where she had made plans with a murderer. I do not have a home anymore. Dominic spoke quietly, his voice careful. Yes, you do. Dawn was approaching, visible through the shattered balcony door, as the sky shifted from black to deep blue, and Mara looked at the window where she was supposed to be getting married in 3 hours, supposed to be walking down an aisle toward a future that had turned out to be a lie. I was supposed to get married in 3 hours. I am sorry. Don't be. You saved my life. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a current of understanding that went deeper than gratitude or alliance, and Yara cleared her throat. We should go. Sun is coming up. Dominic helped Mara to her feet with gentle hands, and they left Marcus's apartment together, walking through the wreckage of her old life toward something unknown, and the bracelet caught the first ray of sunlight, sapphires blazing like captured sky. 2 hours later, Mara was in a guest room at Dominic's penthouse, unable to sleep despite the exhaustion weighing her limbs like lead, and her thoughts spiraled through the wreckage of everything she had thought was true. The life she thought she had was gone. The man she had planned to marry was a murderer. She had helped expose him, but she had also almost died, and everything she thought she knew about her own judgment had been proven catastrophically wrong. A soft knock at her door pulled her from the spiral, and Dominic stood in the doorway with tea, chamomile. Somehow he knew she could not handle anything stronger. May I come in? She nodded, and they sat in silence for a moment, the tea warming her hands even though she could not bring herself to drink it. I know what it is like, to have your world shatter. His voice was quiet, an offering, not a demand. When Elena died, when I realized I could not protect the people I loved, that all my power meant nothing. You saved me tonight. Barely. If you had not stalled, if you had not called for help. But I did. And you came. Tell me about her. Elena. Not how she died, how she lived. Dominic's expression softened, and he described his sister. Her laugh that sounded like bells. Her terrible singing voice that she inflicted on everyone anyway. How she would paint at 3 in the morning when inspiration struck, and wake him up to see what she had created. She wanted to open a gallery that featured both human and vampire artists. She believed in a future where both species coexisted as equals. She was better than all of us. My sister Lily was like that too. Mara's voice cracked as she spoke. Optimistic, idealistic. She wanted to be an artist. What happened to her? Hit and run. 5 years ago. Driver was never found. Mara's voice broke completely, and the tears she had been holding back spilled over. I keep thinking, what if it was not an accident? What if it was like Elena? The shared grief created a bond between them, invisible but stronger than steel, and sunlight began streaming through the window, making Dominic instinctively move into shadow. It hurts you. It is uncomfortable, like standing too close to a fire. Mara crossed to the window and closed the curtains, dimming the room to twilight. Better. He nodded, something like gratitude in his eyes. Thank you. They were close now in the dimmed room, and Mara asked the question that had been building. What happens now, after Marcus is prosecuted? You go back to your life. This is over. Is it? There are other people on those client lists. Other murders. That is my problem to solve. What if I want to help? Dominic looked at her carefully, measuring her words. Why would you? Because I understand what it is like to have questions without answers, and because I do not think I can just go back. Not after this. You are exhausted. You have been through trauma. Do not make decisions now. Then when? When you have had time to think, to grieve, to heal. How long did it take you to heal after Elena? Dominic's silence was answer enough, and Mara pressed forward. Exactly. Some wounds do not close, but maybe we can stop them from happening to others. Yara burst through the door with urgency written across her face. We have a problem. Both turned, and Yara delivered the news like a hammer blow. Marcus made bail. His lawyer got him out an hour ago. Mara's stomach dropped and the room tilted. How is that possible? Money? Connections? Corruption? The same way he has operated for years. Where is he? Dominic's voice was cold fury barely contained. Unknown. He gave his police tail the slip. The threat was not over, and Mara felt fear crawl up her spine with icy fingers. He will come for me, not while I am alive. Yara looked between them. Then we need a new plan. Because the Cathedral of Glass opens for weddings at noon, and legally, Marcus still has a reservation. What are you suggesting? He is going to try to complete the ceremony, with or without a willing bride, if he gets sanctuary. We stop him before he reaches the altar. How? All three looked at each other, and the answer hung in the air. We crash a wedding. The Cathedral of Glass rose before them like a prayer-made architecture, crystal and stained glass reaching toward the sky with ancient beauty, protected by vampire-human treaties that made it neutral ground where both species' laws applied. Back at the penthouse war room, Yara pulled up blueprints and explained the logistics with military precision. Sanctuary law activates the moment vows are spoken, but Marcus needs a bride for the ceremony to be legitimate. He will use a stand-in, bribe someone, forge documents. Dominic was pacing, clearly unhappy with where this was going. No, Mara interrupted, her voice certain. He will come for me. He is obsessed with control. The wedding was never about love, it was about appearances, status. He will not accept a substitute. We let him come for me. Set a trap. Absolutely not. Dominic's refusal was immediate, but Mara pushed forward. You said it yourself, he is slippery, connected. The only way to catch him is to give him what he wants and then spring the trap. She is right. Yara's support was pragmatic. We make him think he has won. I will not use her as bait. I am volunteering. This ends today. The plan came together piece by piece. Mara would go to the cathedral ostensibly to cancel the wedding. Marcus would ambush her there because Yara had intel he had been watching the location. Dominic and Yara would be hidden, waiting for the right moment. When Marcus revealed himself, they would capture him with undeniable evidence and witnesses. The cathedral was neutral ground, so both human and vampire law applied, and neither could claim jurisdiction violations. If I sense you are in real danger, the plan ends. I will not sacrifice you for this. Dominic's condition was non-negotiable. Deal. They shook hands and the touch lingered, warmth spreading from the point of contact. Noon approached and Mara dressed in her wedding gown, the white silk feeling like a costume now instead of a promise, and Yara fitted her with a new wire and backup GPS tracker, while Dominic produced a silver pendant. It is blessed. Wards against compulsion. If Marcus has been using vampire blood, he might have picked up some abilities. Mara entered the cathedral through the main doors, and the space stole her breath despite everything. Vaulted ceilings and light refracting through colored glass creating rainbows on marble floors. Wedding decorations were still up because Marcus's money had kept the reservation, roses and candles and rows of empty chairs, waiting for guests who would never arrive. She walked down the aisle and sat in the front pew, thinking about the life she almost had. Suburban house and children and PTA meetings, safe and boring and false. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She had never loved Marcus. She had loved the idea of safety. And after Lily died, Mara had built walls, and Marcus was just another brick. He stepped from behind the altar wearing his tuxedo and looking perfectly composed. I knew you would come. She stood with her heart pounding, but her voice steady. I came to tell you it is over. No. We are getting married today. Exactly as planned. You are delusional. You are going to prison. Am I? My lawyers are very good. And I have information the police want. Names, locations. They will deal. Marcus advanced, and Mara held her ground. You are going to walk down this aisle, say your vows, and smile. And if you do not, I will make sure every person you love pays for your betrayal. I do not love you. I do not even know you. Marcus grabbed her arm with bruising force. You will learn. We have forever. He was fully unhinged, his grip on reality shattered, and Dominic's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Forever is longer than you think. He stepped from the shadows with Yara behind him, and Marcus snarled like an animal. This is sanctuary ground. You cannot touch me. I am not here to touch you. I am here to witness you break the law again. Yara held up her phone. Assault, kidnapping, attempted forced marriage, all on camera. Marcus pulled a knife and held it to Mara's throat, the blade cold against her skin. One more step and she dies. Everything froze and Dominic's eyes burned red, his control fraying at the edges. The treaty protects me in here. You cannot use vampire powers on sanctuary ground. But I can. Mara stomped on his instep and elbowed his solar plexus, breaking free with moves from the self-defense class she had taken after Lily died, and ran toward Dominic. Marcus lunged after her with the knife swinging, and Dominic moved faster than human eyes could track, catching the blade with his bare hand, blood dripping on holy ground as alarm bells started ringing. Marcus stumbled back and tripped on the altar steps, falling, and the knife, his own knife, was driven into his chest by his own weight and momentum. He gasped, and blood spread across white marble like a stain that would never wash clean. Dominic. Mara's voice was horrified. I did not touch him. The sanctuary laws were not broken. Marcus's dying words were bitter. You did this. No. Dominic knelt beside him. You did this to yourself. Every choice, every murder, every lie. This is justice. Marcus's last breath rattled, and then silence filled the cathedral like water rushing into a vacuum. Police arrived, called by Yara before the confrontation, and cathedral officials confirmed that no vampire powers were used. Marcus's death was self-inflicted in the course of committing a crime, and Dominic was cleared of any wrongdoing. Mara gave her statement in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else, numb and distant, and the wedding that was supposed to be was now a crime scene with yellow tape and evidence markers. Outside the cathedral, Mara and Dominic stood in the breaking dawn, the sun rising over the city in shades of gold and pink. It is over. Yes, I do not know what to do now. You survive, you rebuild, you live the life Elena and Lily did not get to. What about you? I continue. There are more names on Marcus's list, more people who need justice. Then I am coming with you. Mara's voice was certain, and Dominic started to protest. Mara, I told you, I cannot go back, and I will not let you do this alone. They looked at each other for a long moment, something passing between them that neither was ready to name, and finally Dominic nodded. It will not be easy. Nothing worth doing is. They walked away from the cathedral together into the sunrise, leaving the wreckage of her old life behind and stepping into something unknown and dangerous and real. Mara stood in her apartment 3 days after Marcus died, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the physical evidence of a life that had never really been hers, and she inventoried everything with the same clinical detachment she used for damaged artifacts at work. Wedding gifts stacked in the corner waiting to be returned, photos of her and Marcus smiling at fundraisers and gallery openings that she would throw away because his smile now looked like a predator's grin, the bracelet sitting on her nightstand because she was keeping it as a reminder that beautiful things could hide terrible secrets. Jenna arrived with wine and terrible jokes about vampires and blood-sucking boyfriends, the kind of inappropriate humor that only best friends could get away with, and Mara was grateful for the normalcy even though nothing felt normal anymore. So you are really doing this, moving in with the Vampire King? Jenna said it like a joke, but her eyes were serious, watching Mara's face for signs of instability or poor judgment. I am not moving in. I am working with him. There is a difference. Mara kept her voice light as she wrapped picture frames in newspaper. Is there because you have not stopped talking about him for 3 days? Mara felt heat rise in her cheeks and focused very intently on the frame in her hands. It is not like that. Then what is it like? Jenna sat on the arm of the couch, not helping but providing moral support through presence. Mara struggled to articulate the feeling that had been growing since the cathedral, the sense that her old life had been sleepwalking and Dominic had somehow woken her up to reality, to danger, to purpose. It is like I have been sleepwalking my whole life, and he woke me up. The words sounded dramatic, but Jenna just nodded like she understood. Mara showed her the files Dominic had given her, Marcus's client list spread across the coffee table like evidence at a trial. 37 names, and half of them were dead, murdered for their artifacts or their blood or their knowledge. The living ones were scattered across the country, a network of black market dealers and vampire hunters and people who treated sentient beings like commodity. And Mara's new role was to use her conservator expertise to authenticate artifacts, trace provenance, build legal cases that would hold up in both human and vampire courts. You are going to be like a supernatural art detective. Jenna's assessment was accurate if simplified, something like that. Mara agreed, already feeling the pull of the work, the way each artifact was a puzzle and she had always been good at puzzles. There is something you should know. I did some digging after you told me about Lily. Jenna's tone shifted to serious, and she handed Mara a folder with the careful handling of someone presenting evidence of pain. Inside was the police report from Lily's death, the full version that had never been shared with the family because certain details had been redacted for reasons the police never explained. A witness mentioned a suspicious vehicle that fled the scene, a black SUV with custom plates, and the description matched a vehicle registered to one of Marcus's shell companies 5 years ago, right down to the partial plate number. Mara's hands started shaking so hard, the papers rustled like leaves in wind. Marcus killed my sister. The words came out flat because her brain could not process the enormity of what she was reading. Maybe, or someone in his network, the timeline fits. Jenna's voice was gentle, but she was not taking back the information, not softening the blow. Mara had been holding it together for 3 days, functioning on autopilot through police statements and closing bank accounts and canceling a wedding that had turned into a funeral. But this broke her completely. She sobbed with her whole body, the kind of crying that came from the deepest place of grief. And Jenna held her the way she had held Mara at Lily's actual funeral 5 years ago. He took everything from me before I even knew it. Mara's voice was muffled against Jenna's shoulder, but the rage and grief poured out together, two sides of the same coin. But you stopped him from taking more. You saved lives, Mara. Jenna's logic was sound, but it felt hollow against the weight of loss. It does not bring her back. No, but it means something. They sat like that until Mara's tears ran dry, and she felt hollowed out, but somehow lighter, like lancing a wound to let the poison drain. I am going to find out who killed Lily, and they are going to pay. Mara's voice was steady now, forged in fire. I know you will. Just be careful. This world you are stepping into is dangerous. Jenna pulled back to look at her friend's face. I know, but I am not alone. No, you have a very scary, very powerful, very attractive vampire on your side. Jenna's smile was wicked, and Mara could not help but smile back, despite everything. Jenna, that is not. Just saying, if you are going to have a supernatural bodyguard, might as well enjoy the view. The absurdity of discussing Dominic's appearance in the middle of packing up the wreckage of her life made Mara laugh. A real laugh that surprised them both. Mara's phone buzzed and Dominic's name appeared on the screen with a text that read, "Are you ready?" She looked around the apartment at the boxes and the empty walls and the ghost of who she used to be, and texted back a single word, "Yes." She grabbed the last box and walked out the door without looking back, because looking back was how you turned into a pillar of salt, frozen in the past. Dominic's headquarters was not just a penthouse, but a full operation spanning 3 floors of the building. A functioning organization that made Mara realize this was not just one vampire's vendetta, but a systematic effort at justice. The team assembled in the operations center looked like something from a supernatural heist movie. Yara, who Mara already knew as head of security, Thaddeus, who was an ancient vampire archivist with milky blind eyes that somehow saw more than most people with perfect vision, Sophia, who was a tech specialist covered in tattoos that glowed faintly with what looked like protective runes, and Elias, who was a Dampier lawyer, with the kind of sharp suit and sharper mind that made opposing counsel weep. Dominic gave Mara the tour with obvious pride in what they had built. Floor 1 was operations with surveillance equipment and communications and planning rooms covered in maps and photographs. Floor 2 was archives with centuries of records and vampire history and artifact catalogs that made Mara's conservator heart sing. Floor 3 was residence and Dominic's personal space where Mara had stayed after the cathedral. Her office was on floor 2, surrounded by rare books and relics, a beautiful room with natural light filtered through UV protective glass and workstations that would make any museum jealous. Thaddeus showed her the collection with reverent hands that knew exactly where everything was despite his blindness, illuminated manuscripts and ancient weapons and jewelry and art, and everything had a story that was mostly tragic. These items were taken from murdered vampires over the past 50 years. Our job is to return them to rightful families and prosecute the thieves. His voice was papery with age, but strong with purpose. 50 years of murders. Mara could not wrap her mind around the scale. Vampires live long lives. We are valuable targets. Our blood, our possessions, our knowledge, all currency in the black market. Thaddeus explained it like he was discussing commodity trading instead of lives destroyed. Mara's first case was a golden locket dated 1847, taken from a vampire named Catherine Moreau, who was killed in Paris with her body never found, and the locket had surfaced last year in an estate sale in Boston. Her task was to authenticate it, trace the chain of custody, find the killer's descendants if human or the killer if vampire, and bring justice to a crime that was nearly 200 years old. Mara examined the locket under magnification with the focused intensity she brought to all conservation work, noting wear patterns and engraving style and metal composition, and she cross-referenced everything with Thaddeus's historical records that were meticulous beyond reason. She found a jeweler's mark that led to a specific shop in Paris, and the shop's records preserved in vampire archives because vampires never threw anything away, showed the original commission. The locket was commissioned by Catherine's husband as an anniversary gift, and he died in 1852 as a human. But the records showed the locket was sold in 1855 by a woman named Margot Dubois. Mara traced Margot through census records and employment histories. She was Catherine's lady's maid, and she left France in 1849 and came to America and bought property in Boston with a suspicious amount of money that no lady's maid should have possessed. Margot's descendants still lived in Boston, and one of them was on Marcus's client list. The locket had been in their family for generations before being sold, and Mara brought her findings to Dominic, with triumph and horror mixed together. This is bigger than random crimes. These are family operations passed down. Her voice shook with the implications. Vampire hunting as a hereditary profession, we have suspected but never had proof. Dominic's face was grim as he studied her documentation. The team celebrated Mara's first successful trace with champagne for the humans and blood wine for the vampires. Sophia brought out good glasses instead of paper cups. Elias prepared legal documents to reclaim the locket and pursue criminal charges against the descendants, and Thaddeus smiled with genuine warmth. You have a gift for this. The words made Mara feel pride for the first time in months. She was good at this work. She mattered. She was making a difference in a way her museum job never had. Later that night in her office, Dominic found her still working under the warm glow of her desk lamp, surrounded by artifacts and records. You should rest. It is nearly dawn. His voice was gentle but concerned. I cannot. There are so many more. Every object in this room represents a life stolen. Mara gestured at the shelves with their silent witnesses. Dominic sat across from her, and his usual commanding presence softened into something more human. You cannot save them all. But I can try to give them justice. Is not that what you have been doing? Yes, but it has cost me a lot. What has it cost you? Mara set down her magnifying glass to give him her full attention. I have spent 3 years obsessed with Elena's death. I have pushed away friends, ignored responsibilities, let the rest of my life crumble. I do not want that for you. The admission was vulnerable in a way she had not seen from him before. Then do not let me do it alone. We will keep each other balanced. Is that what we are doing? Their eyes met across the desk, and the tension that had been building since the night of the auction crystallized into something tangible. I do not know. What are we doing? Dominic reached across the desk and took her hand, his skin cool against hers but not unpleasant. I think we are surviving together. His thumb traced circles on her palm, and every nerve ending in her body suddenly woke up. They leaned closer, and their breath mingled in the space between them, and Mara could see flecks of gold in his eyes that she had never noticed before. But then the alarm blared with ear-splitting urgency. Yara's voice came over the intercom, cutting through the moment like a knife. We have a breach. Someone is trying to hack our servers. Dominic and Mara sprang apart and rushed to operations where Sophia was already at her monitors with multiple screens showing code and firewalls and intrusion attempts. Someone is good. They got past 3 firewalls before I noticed. Sophia's fingers flew across keyboards. What are they after? Dominic's voice was pure command. Client lists, specifically the living clients. They are downloading names and addresses. Can you trace them? Mara asked, even though she knew the answer would complicate everything. Already on it. Location is here, in the building, somewhere on floors 1 through 3. Sophia's words hung in the air like a death sentence, and everyone looked at each other with suspicion and fear mixed together, because they had a traitor in their midst, and no one knew who to trust anymore. The building went into immediate lockdown, with steel shutters slamming over windows and magnetic locks engaging on every door, no one in or out. And Dominic ordered security footage review with the kind of cold fury that made everyone move faster. Only 6 people had access to all 3 floors, the core team, and one of them was the traitor, which meant the family they had built was compromised from within. Tension crackled through the operations room like electricity before a storm, and Yara was the first to voice suspicion. She is human, newest member, has the tech skills. Yara's eyes were hard on Sophia, who bristled immediately. I have been working my ass off for this team, you have no right. Sophia's voice shook with anger or fear, or both. Elias pointed out with lawyer precision that Dampierre could be bribed too, that Yara had family in Europe who could be threatened or leveraged, and Yara whirled on him with murder in her eyes. How dare you suggest I would ever betray this team? My loyalty is beyond question. Dominic's voice cut through the argument like a blade. Enough. We do not turn on each other without evidence. Mara had been watching Thaddeus during the entire exchange and noticed he was quiet. Too quiet, his blind eyes staring at nothing while everyone else argued. Thaddeus, you are the archivist. If someone wanted to know what we had, who we are investigating, you would know before anyone. Her voice was gentle but pointed. Thaddeus turned his head toward her with eerie precision and spoke calmly. Yes, I would, but I am also 300 years old and blind. How would I hack a computer? The logic was sound, and Mara felt embarrassed for suggesting it. Sophia's fingers had been flying across keyboards during the entire confrontation, and suddenly she shouted, Got it! The signal originated from Floor 2, Archive Section, Terminal 7. That was Mara's office, and everyone turned to look at her with varying degrees of suspicion. I did not. I would not. Mara's protest sounded weak even to her own ears. Dominic's face was unreadable as he commanded them to follow him to the archives. They crowded into Mara's office, and Sophia checked the terminal with professional efficiency. The login showed Mara's credentials used 20 minutes ago, but Mara had been in the conference room with Dominic at that exact time and security footage verified it. Someone used her login without her knowledge or permission. Elias spoke with the careful tone of someone presenting evidence. Someone is framing her, but who has access to her credentials? Mara felt her stomach drop as she remembered her terrible security practice. I wrote them down. I know I should not have, but there were so many passwords, I kept a notebook. She opened her desk drawer with shaking hands and the notebook was gone. When did you last see it? Yara's question was sharp. This morning, I used it to log in when I arrived. So someone took it between then and now. The time frame was narrow, which should have helped but instead made everyone more paranoid. They reviewed security footage from the archive and saw multiple people passing through at various points. All team members had legitimate reasons to be there. But there was one gap where the camera went to static for 90 seconds before returning to normal. That is not a glitch. That is a professional hack. Sophia's assessment was damning. Only someone with deep system access could do that. Yara was thinking out loud. Or someone who knows our security protocols intimately. Sophia added, and the net was tightening. Dominic listed who knew the protocols with methodical precision, himself, Yara who designed them, Sophia who maintained them, Elias whose legal oversight required access. But Thaddeus did not use computers, and Mara was too new to have that kind of knowledge. One of the inner circle was compromised, and the realization made the air feel thin. Thaddeus spoke into the heavy silence with his papery ancient voice. Or consider this. Perhaps the traitor is not trying to betray us. Perhaps they are trying to protect someone. Dominic's attention snapped to the old vampire. Explain. If I wanted to warn the client network without being discovered, I would frame someone expendable, someone new. Thaddeus gestured vaguely in Mara's direction. You think this is about me? Mara's voice was small. I think this is about making you look guilty so the real traitor can continue operating. Who benefits if you are removed from the team? The question hung in the air, and Mara's mind raced through possibilities. The only active case I am working is the Moreau locket, the descendants in Boston. Elias went very still and his face drained of color. That family hired me 5 years ago for estate planning. I have their files. The silence that followed was deafening, and Yara's hand moved to her weapon with practiced ease. Elias backed away with his hands up in a placating gesture. Wait, you do not understand. Dominic's voice was ice and steel. You had access to Mara's office, our protocols, the client list. Why? It is not what you think. Then what is it? Elias looked desperate, cornered, and the words came tumbling out. They have my daughter, the network. They took her 2 months ago, said if I did not cooperate, they would kill her. Why did you not tell us? Mara's question was genuine confusion, not accusation. Because you are vampire-focused, you do not care about human problems. My daughter is human, and she is not your priority. Elias's voice broke on the last word. Dominic's response surprised everyone. That is where you are wrong. She becomes my priority now. Tell me everything. Elias collapsed into a chair like his strings had been cut and confessed everything. He had been feeding information for weeks. Small things at first like case timelines and investigation targets. Then they demanded the full client list, and he refused until they sent him a video of his daughter beaten and broken. He complied because what choice did fathers have when their children were threatened? They said if I gave them the list and destroyed your archives, they would release her. Yara's voice was sharp with betrayal. You were going to destroy centuries of records. Elias looked at her with hollow eyes. She is my child. I would burn the world for her. Mara understood that bone deep because she would have done the same for Lily, would have traded anything for one more day with her sister. Where is the exchange? Dominic was already thinking tactically. Tomorrow night, Pier 47, list for my daughter. Then that is where we will be too. The plan came together quickly. They would let Elias go through with the trade. But instead of the real list, Sophia would create a fake with trackers embedded in the code. When the network took it, they would lead the team straight to their base, and they could rescue Elias's daughter while capturing the network operatives. If this goes wrong... Elias could not finish the sentence. It will not. I do not fail twice. Dominic's conviction was absolute. Elias was confined to quarters for his safety and theirs, and the team prepared for the operation with the focused intensity of people going into battle. Mara found Dominic later staring out at the city lights and asked the question that had been bothering her. Do you really think we can save her? I have to believe we can. Otherwise, what are we doing this for? His answer was honest. Justice. Mara said it like a prayer. Justice and mercy are not opposites. Elena taught me that. Dominic's voice was soft with memory, and they stood together in comfortable silence, knowing that tomorrow they would go to war. Pier 47 at midnight was exactly as atmospheric as every crime movie had promised, fog rolling off the water creating shifting walls of white, the smell of salt and rot mixing into something primordial, and Mara's heart hammered so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Elias stood alone at the end of the pier, holding a USB drive that contained Sophia's masterwork of fake data, while Dominic and Mara and Yara and Sophia hid in shipping containers nearby, with mercenary snipers on rooftops covering every angle. The wait was excruciating, and Mara's hands were sweaty despite the cold. She was armed because Yara had insisted, a silver knife blessed by some vampire priest and small enough to hide. Dominic was beside her, utterly still in the way only vampires could be, predator waiting for prey, and his presence was both terrifying and comforting in equal measure. 3 black vans pulled up with headlights, cutting through fog, and armed guards exited, 6 of them with military-grade weapons and body armor. Then a woman stepped out who was mid-40s and expensively dressed like she was going to the opera instead of a criminal exchange. She approached Elias with casual confidence. "You have what we want." Elias's voice was steady despite everything. "Where is my daughter?" The woman signaled, and one van opened to reveal a girl of 16, bound and gagged and terrified, dragged out by guards who handled her roughly. Mara watched Elias's face crumble with relief and rage warring for dominance. The girl was alive but clearly had been through hell. "Let her go first," Elias demanded. "Show me the list first." The woman countered, and they were at a standoff. Elias held up the USB drive, and the woman took it, plugged it into a tablet, and scrolled through the fake data with narrowed eyes before nodding. "Release the girl." The guards shoved her toward Elias, who caught her and held her like she was made of glass. But then the woman smiled, and it was a terrible smile. "Kill them both." Guards raised weapons, and Dominic's signal cut through the night. "Now." Chaos erupted in a symphony of violence, and Dominic blurred into motion faster than Mara's eyes could track, disarming 2 guards before they could fire, while Yara and Sophia opened fire from the containers with practiced precision, and sniper shots rang out, taking down van drivers. Mara ran for Elias and his daughter, pulled them to cover behind crates, while bullets pinged off metal all around them. The woman was not panicking, she was smiling like this was all going according to plan, and she spoke into a radio. Plan B. More vans arrived with a dozen reinforcements, and Mara realized with sinking dread that this was a trap for the hunters, not the hunted. Dominic was a whirlwind of controlled violence. He was not just fast, he was efficient, breaking bones and disarming and incapacitating without killing because he had a code. But there were too many, and even he had limits. Yara took a bullet in the shoulder and kept fighting with gritted teeth. Sophia was pinned down behind a container returning fire, and Mara had a choice to make. She could stay hidden and protect Elias's daughter like the smart thing to do, or she could help. And when she saw Dominic surrounded by 4 guards, she made her choice. Mara grabbed a dropped gun and fired. Missed completely, but the distraction was enough for Dominic to take down 3 guards in a blur of movement. The 4th swung at Mara, and she ducked on instinct, slashed with her silver knife, and the guard screamed because silver burned, and he was a vampire, which meant she had just outed herself as a threat. The vampire guard was faster than her and stronger, knocked the knife away easily, and lifted her by the throat with one hand, and Mara kicked and clawed but could not breathe. Dominic roared, and it was not a human sound. It shook the pier and sent vibrations through the wood, and he tore the guard away from her and slammed him into the ground so hard the wood cracked and splintered. For a moment, Mara saw what Dominic truly was, ancient and powerful and inhuman. His eyes fully red and fangs extended, and face transformed into something from nightmares, and he was utterly terrifying. But when he looked at her gasping on the ground, he softened, and his voice was gentle. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head because she could not speak yet. The woman who had orchestrated this called out a retreat. "This is not over, Ashford. You just declared war on the entire network." Her name was Victoria Cross, and she signaled her surviving forces to flee while Dominic let them go, because saving lives was the priority, not revenge. The pier was destroyed, littered with unconscious bodies and spent shells and blood, and police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. "We need to leave now." Dominic's command was absolute, and they piled into their van and sped away before cops arrived. Elias cradled his daughter, whose name was Maya, and she was in shock, and Mara held her and murmured reassurances while Dominic drove with white knuckles gripping the wheel. Back at headquarters with dawn approaching, Maya was asleep, sedated by a vampire doctor they kept on retainer, and Elias thanked them with a broken voice. "I am sorry for everything." Dominic's response was firm, but not cruel. "You are off the team, but you are alive. Go be a father." Elias left with his daughter, and Mara and Yara and Sophia and Dominic remained in the operations room. Victoria Cross, she is old money, connected to half the vampire aristocracy. We just made powerful enemies. Yara's assessment was strategic. Good, let them know we are coming. Dominic's smile was all teeth. What now? Mara asked, even though she knew the answer. Dominic looked at her, and she was covered in blood with her dress torn and eyes fierce. And he saw a warrior, not a victim. Now we finish this. Mara nodded because they were in it together, and there was no going back, only forward into whatever war they had just started. Time had passed, and 1 week later, the team had regrouped and reinforced their operations, while Sophia tracked the fake USB drive with obsessive precision, and the trace led them to a server farm in Nevada, operated by a front company called Digital Horizons LLC, that processed encrypted communications for the entire black market network. If they could access it, they could map the whole operation and dismantle it piece by piece. So Dominic and Mara and Yara drove to Nevada in a 16-hour journey fraught with tension and unexpected banter, while Sophia stayed behind to coordinate remotely, and Thaddeus researched the network's history in dusty archives. Yara slept in the back seat for most of the drive, and Mara and Dominic really talked for the first time, without the weight of immediate crisis pressing down on them. How old are you really? Mara's question was soft, curious rather than demanding. 537, give or take a decade. Dominic's answer was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. What was it like when you returned? She wanted to understand him, this man who was becoming increasingly important to her in ways that terrified and thrilled her. He told her about 1487 during the Italian Renaissance, when he was a scholar, bitten by a vampire patron who saw potential in a young man who loved books more than wine, and he had seen empires rise and fall, and loved and lost more times than he could count. After a while, you stop letting people in because it hurts less. His voice carried the weight of centuries. But you let Elena in, Mara pointed out gently. She was my sister. I did not have a choice. The pain in his voice was still raw despite 3 years. And now, are you letting me in? Her question hung in the air between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Long silence stretched as Desert Highway rolled past, and finally he spoke. I am trying. Those 2 words held more vulnerability than any lengthy confession could have. Mara told him about her life in small-town Ohio, art school dropout turned conservator by accident rather than design, and how Lily's death broke her family so thoroughly that her parents divorced and blamed each other in an endless cycle of grief and rage. She had thrown herself into work and avoided feeling anything real, because feeling meant hurting, and Marcus was perfect because he did not require emotional investment. He was safe, which turned out to mean he was the most dangerous choice she ever made. You could not have known. Dominic's absolution was gentle. Neither could you with Elena. But we blame ourselves anyway. Understanding passed between them like an electric current, 2 wounded people recognizing their reflections in each other. They arrived in Nevada as the sun set, and the server farm was a nondescript building in the desert surrounded by chain-link fences, topped with barbed wire. And they staked it out from a cheap motel across the highway while planning the infiltration with military precision. Night fell like a curtain, and Yara led the operation because this was her expertise, cutting power and disabling cameras and bypassing locks with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 100 times before. Inside the building, rows of servers hummed in climate-controlled silence, and Sophia guided them via communications earpiece. You need server bay 7, 4th rack, plug in the device. Her instructions were precise and calm. Guards patrolled the facility, and there were more than expected, which complicated their timeline. So Dominic created a distraction by setting off an alarm on the opposite end of the building while Mara and Yara slipped into Bay 7 with hearts pounding. Mara's hands shook as she plugged in Sophia's device, and it began downloading data, the progress bar crawling at 2%, then 5% in an agonizingly slow climb. A guard entered Bay 7, and Yara dropped him silently with a tranquilizer dart, but his radio crackled with static. Jensen report. They had seconds before backup arrived, and the download was only at 47%, then 63%, while Mara watched the numbers climb and prayed to gods she did not believe in. Dominic appeared at the bay entrance, and his voice was commanding. "Go, I will hold them." Mara protested because there were too many guards converging on their position. "I have survived wars. I can survive this. Go." His order was absolute, and the download hit 89%, then 95%, while Mara's finger hovered over the device. 100%, and she yanked it free, and she and Yara ran for the exit, while behind them came sounds of fighting, Dominic against a dozen guards, and Mara wanted to go back, but Yara grabbed her arm. "He ordered us to go, we go." They reached the car and sped away into the desert night with dust billowing behind them. Back at the motel, Mara paced like a caged animal, while Yara cleaned weapons and pretended to be calm, and an hour passed with no word from Dominic, which made Mara's panic rise in her throat. "We should go back," her voice was desperate. "And get killed. He will make it." Yara's confidence seemed unshakable. "How do you know?" "Because he always does." At 3 in the morning, Dominic walked through the motel door bloodied and with his suit torn but alive, and Mara rushed to him, checking for injuries with frantic hands. "You are hurt. I will heal." He said it like a simple fact, but she touched his face anyway, cataloging each cut and bruise, and their eyes locked. This time no one interrupted, and Dominic leaned down, while Mara rose up, and their lips met, tentative at first, then desperate. A kiss that tasted like relief and fear, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard, and the air between them felt charged. That was overdue. Mara's voice was breathless. He smiled, and it was rare and genuine, and transformed his face into something young, despite his centuries. "Finally, can we sleep now?" Yara's voice came from the other bed, dry with amusement. Sophia called moments later, and her voice was urgent. "I have got the data. You need to see this." She sent files to Mara's laptop, and they huddled around it, the intimacy of moments before shifting into focused intensity as they reviewed what Sophia had found. The network was vast, with hundreds of members and dozens of cells operating on 6 continents, and at the center was a name that made everything worse. Victoria Cross was not the leader, she reported to someone else. And the true head of the network was Counselor Aldrich Thorne, a vampire aristocrat and member of the Immortal High Council. Dominic's face went white with shock and betrayal. "Thorne, he was at Elena's funeral. He comforted me." The words came out strangled. "He has been playing you for 3 years." Mara's statement was gentle but unflinching. "Then it is time he stopped playing." Dominic's voice was ice and fury combined, and Mara saw the ancient predator rising to the surface. Dominic called in every favor and used his status as Vampire King to demand an emergency session of the Immortal High Council, and he and Mara and Yara flew to Geneva, while Mara experienced her first international trip in the vampire world, which was stranger than anything she could have imagined. Thaddeus joined them because his testimony would be crucial. 300 years of memory and records that could corroborate their evidence. The council chambers were an underground palace beneath Geneva, all marble and obsidian and ancient power, and 7 council members sat on thrones radiating authority that made the air feel thick. Aldrich Thorne was among them, with silver hair and distinguished features, and he greeted Dominic warmly like an old friend. "My friend, what urgent matter brings you before us?" His concern seemed genuine. I am here to charge you with conspiracy and murder and treason against vampire law." Dominic's accusation rang through the chamber, and the other council members erupted in shock and outrage. Elias testified via video link from protective custody. his face haggard as he described being blackmailed, and Sophia presented the server data showing Thorne's encrypted communications with network operatives across the globe. Thaddeus provided historical context with his papery voice, explaining how Thorne had been embezzling council funds for 50 years and financing the black market through shell companies and false fronts. Mara presented the Lockett case and 12 others, each with trails leading inexorably to Thorne's network like spokes on a wheel. Thorne remained calm through all of it, and his defense was measured. This is circumstantial. Encryption can be faked. Testimony can be coerced. His smile was slight and confident. Then explain why Elena Ashford's bracelet was in Marcus Hale's possession, and why Hale's financial records show payments to shell companies you control. Dominic's question was a blade aimed at the heart. I control hundreds of companies. I cannot be responsible for every transaction. Thorne's answer was smooth, but Mara saw the first crack in his composure. She stepped forward and produced a recording captured on Yara's body camera during the pier fight, and Victoria Cross's voice filled the chamber. Thorne will not be happy we lost the list. He wanted to clean house before the council noticed. The words were damning, and Thorne's expression finally cracked to reveal fury beneath the distinguished mask. Lady Morgaine, who was the eldest council member, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. Aldrich Thorne, you stand accused by evidence and testimony. How do you answer? Thorne showed his true face at last, and his voice dripped with contempt. I answer that you are all hypocrites. You sit in your palaces pretending to care about justice while the world burns. I took action. I built power. I survived by killing your own kind. Lady Morgaine's question was sharp. By eliminating the weak, Elena Ashford was weak because she wanted peace with humans, which is pathetic. I ordered her death myself. The confession hung in the air, and Dominic moved toward Thorne with murder blazing in his eyes. What will you do, Dominic? Kill me in the council chambers, you will be executed. Thorne laughed, but Lady Morgaine raised her hand. He will not, but we will. She signaled guards with ancient authority. Aldrich Thorne, you are stripped of your seat and sentenced to the blood oath. You will face every family you have wronged in single combat until you fall. Thorne's smile faded as the reality of his sentence sank in. You cannot do this. We can, and we have. Lady Morgaine's judgment was final, and Thorne was dragged away screaming threats that echoed through the marble halls. The council apologized to Dominic for failing Elena and failing him, and Dominic's response was measured despite the rage still burning in his chest. Justice is served. That is what matters. Lady Morgaine turned to Mara with something like respect in her ancient eyes. And you, Mara Chen, a human who exposed a council member, you have our gratitude. I just want to go home. Mara's honesty was refreshing in a room full of political maneuvering. Outside the chambers, Mara collapsed against the wall as adrenaline drained from her system, leaving her exhausted and emotionally wrung out, and Dominic held her with strong arms. You were extraordinary in there. I was terrified. So was I. The admission cost him something, and they stood together holding each other up. Yara approached with news that the network was scattered, and without Thorne and Victoria in custody, the cells were going dark. They had won this battle even if the war continued. What happens now? Mara's question was directed at Dominic, but also at herself. That depends. What do you want? His answer put the choice in her hands. She realized she was at a crossroads and could walk away, return to her old life, or what was left of it after everything that had happened, or she could stay and keep fighting and build something new from the ashes of grief. She thought of Elena and Lily, and all the victims who never got justice, whose names were forgotten by everyone except those who loved them. I want to finish what we started, all of it. Her decision was clear. It will not be easy. Nothing worth doing is. She smiled, and he kissed her forehead with tenderness that belied his ancient nature. Then let us go home. They walked out of the council building into the Swiss sunset together, two people who had found each other in darkness and chosen to walk toward light. And whatever came next, they would face it side by side. 2 months had passed, and autumn had settled over the city, with leaves falling in copper and gold spirals, the air crisp enough to require jackets, and Mara had built a new life from the ashes of her old one. She was officially part of Dominic's team with the title Chief Conservator and Historical Investigator, and she had moved into the headquarters building on her own floor because boundaries mattered even when hearts were involved. Her apartment was filled with books and art and case files that spilled across every surface. A beautiful chaos that reflected her transformed existence, and she had found something she thought lost forever, which was purpose. The team solved cases in a rhythm that felt almost routine. The Moreau locket returned to Catherine's descendants in France, who wept with gratitude. A stolen painting recovered, and its vampire owner, thought dead for decades, found alive in hiding and overjoyed to reclaim his treasured possession. And 3 murderers brought to justice, with 2 being human and 1 vampire, because evil wore many faces. Each victory was small in the grand scheme, but meaningful to the families who finally had answers. And Mara felt the weight of each success like a balm on old wounds. She finally got closure on Lily's case when she discovered the driver who killed her sister was a low-level member of Marcus's network who died in a prison fight 2 years ago, likely silenced before he could talk to authorities. And it was not the justice she wanted, but it was truth, which had its own kind of power. She visited Lily's grave on a cold October afternoon and told her sister everything about vampires and conspiracies and finding love in the last place she expected. "I am living for both of us now. I hope that is enough." Her words were carried away on the wind, and she imagined Lily's approval in the rustling leaves. Mara and Dominic were together, but they moved slowly, building something solid rather than rushing into intensity. And they had dinner and talked for hours and shared their pasts in pieces that fit together like a mosaic. The physical intimacy was there, simmering beneath every touch, but not rushed, because they both knew that what they were building deserved care. One night, after a particularly hard case where they could not save a young vampire from his abusive maker, Mara showed up at Dominic's door at midnight. "Can I stay here tonight? I do not want to be alone, always." His answer was immediate, and they fell asleep on his couch with her head on his chest and his hand in her hair, and it was the most peaceful either had felt in years. Jenna visited in November for the best friend approval test and met Dominic with arms crossed and suspicious eyes. "So you are the vampire king who swept my best friend into a life of danger." Her tone was challenging. "That is an accurate summary." Dominic's honesty was refreshing. "Good. Just making sure you know what you have got. Break her heart, and I will find a way to kill you." Jenna's threat was sincere despite the impossibility. "Understood." Dominic took her seriously, which earned grudging respect. Later, Jenna pulled Mara aside and her face was soft. "I like him. He looks at you like you are the only thing that matters. Is that a good thing?" Mara was genuinely uncertain. "Yeah, it is a really good thing." Jenna's approval meant the world, and Mara felt another piece of her life click into place. Lady Morgaine sent a formal letter on cream-colored parchment sealed with the council emblem, and the Immortal Council wanted to establish a permanent human liaison office, and they wanted Mara to run it. The position would mean more travel and more cases and more danger, but also more impact and more justice, and the chance to change vampire-human relations on a global scale. Mara brought the offer to Dominic one evening as they shared wine on his balcony. "What do you think?" "I think you would be brilliant, but I am biased." His smile was warm. "I would have to split my time, part here with you and part in Geneva with the council. We would make it work." His confidence was unwavering. "You are okay with that?" She needed to hear him say it clearly. Dominic took her hands, and his centuries-old eyes were steady. "Mara, you have changed my life. You have given me hope again. I am not going to cage you. If this is what you want, then take it." His generosity made her love him even more, and she kissed him hard, and accepted the position the next day. They celebrated with the team over champagne for the humans and blood wine for the vampires, toasts and laughter filling the operations room, and for the first time since Lily died, Mara felt like she belonged somewhere. Late that night, Mara and Dominic stood on the penthouse balcony with city lights below and stars above, and the question came soft. Do you ever regret it, that night at the auction? Not for a second, you? She turned to face him. I regret that I could not save you from pain, but I do not regret finding you. We found each other. Her correction mattered, and they kissed soft and sweet. What happens next? Whatever we want. I like the sound of that. They stood together ready for whatever came, because they had already survived the worst and come out stronger. 1 year later, spring had returned and Mara stood in the Immortal Council building in Geneva, in front of a brass plaque that read, Human Liaison Office, Director Mara Chen, and the sight still made her heart swell with pride. The office was thriving with 20 cases closed and 50 families reunited with lost relics, and a dozen murderers prosecuted across 6 countries. And Mara had built a team of conservators and historians and investigators, both human and vampire, working together toward common goals. She was confident and strong, no longer the woman who almost married a monster out of fear and loneliness, and she wore the bracelet still, but now it was a symbol of strength rather than theft. She had started painting again, and her first piece in years was a portrait of Elena and Lily together as imagined friends. 2 women she loved who never got to meet, but who would have understood each other. Dominic arrived in Geneva unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, and Mara lit up when she saw him walking into her office. You are early. I missed you. The simple honesty of it made her cross the room and embrace him, kiss him, hold him like he was her anchor in stormy seas. Being apart was hard, but it made their time together precious. Every moment savored rather than taken for granted. Dominic had news, and he delivered it without preamble. I am stepping down as Vampire King. Mara was shocked and pulled back to search his face. What? Why? Because I have spent 500 years being what others needed. I want to spend the next 500 being what I choose. And what do you choose? You, us, this work, a life that matters. His declaration was everything, and Mara cried because the sacrifice he was making was enormous. Are you sure? I have never been more sure of anything. He wiped her tears with gentle thumbs, and she believed him. They made plans over dinner to split time between Geneva and the city, work together on cases, and build a life that was theirs, rather than something inherited or expected. And Dominic would join Mara's team officially, using his centuries of knowledge to help solve mysteries that span generations. They would be partners in every sense, and the future stretched before them full of possibility. They attended a charity gala that echoed the opening of their story, arriving together hand in hand with Mara wearing a new dress in silver that caught the light but was different because she was different. They danced surrounded by humans and vampires mingling peacefully, the future Elena had dreamed of slowly becoming reality through small acts of courage and connection. Mara unclasped the bracelet and held it up in the light. I think it is time to return this, to Elena's grave. Are you sure? Dominic's question was gentle. It was never mine. It belongs with her. Then we will go together. They left the gala and drove to the cemetery where Elena rested, and at her headstone Mara placed the bracelet on the marble with reverent care. Dominic knelt and touched the stone with a hand that trembled slightly. I found justice for you, little sister, and I found something else too, thank you. His gratitude was for Elena's memory, which had led him to Mara and to healing. They walked away from the grave toward the sunrise, and Dominic stopped at the edge of shadow where light would burn him. I cannot go further. Then I will stand with you here, in the middle, between dark and light. Mara took her place beside him. Is that what we are? Think so? We are proof that both sides can coexist, that love can survive anything. Her conviction was absolute. Dominic pulled her close and spoke words he had not said in centuries. I love you, Mara Chen. I love you too, Dominic Ashford. They kissed as the sun rose and stood at the threshold between night and day, two people who had found each other across impossible divides. Mara stepped into the sunlight while Dominic remained in shadow, and their hands stayed linked across the divide, refusing to let go. And behind them on Elena's grave, the bracelet caught the first ray of sun and glinted like a promise of hope. The auction changed everything because she sold her last night as a single woman and bought a lifetime of purpose and justice and love. And she never looked back toward the safety of her old life because forward was where everything that mattered waited.